I'm Heather Vale with Performance Marketing Insider. Welcome to Paper Call Secrets, which is a special roundtable discussion we're hosting today with experts in the paper call industry. I've got Amalia Beckman, the Customer Success Manager from Invoca. Hi, Amalia.
Hi there.
And we also have Kevin Wolski, who's the Director of Sales and Distribution for Ring Partner. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Hello.
We have Ron McKinney, who's the Director of Sales for Mobile Fused. Hey, Ron.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good, good. And we have Brian Osterhout, who's the VP of Sales for Search Initiatives. Hey, Brian, welcome to the call.
Thank you.
All right, so guys, what we're going to do today, we're going to be talking about paper call secrets. We're going to help marketers who have been using paper call take the results to the next level, and along the way we might kind of cover some of the basics in case people watching have not yet used paper call. But you know, it's 2015, brand new year, people are looking to take their marketing results to the next level. I'm going to ask each of you, what do you think is the best way for marketers to do that, to take the results to the next level, get higher ROI with pay-per call in 2015? Start with Kevin.
Sure. So we're finding a lot of marketers that have experience in regular online, CPL, performance marketing, and they're making that switch over. And there's not a huge jump. There's a little tweaks here and there, and you want to be able to look at optimizing your campaign and looking at it. The idea is for us is understanding your traffic, understanding your calls, where the demographic is. Some states convert better than other states, genders. You want to look at that, and we see the nice thing about the pay-per call side of it is you have a lot of insight into what's happening when the call's connected. So you get to see the region, if they're out of region, if that's why they didn't convert, or if it's out of call hours, or things like that. And you can also look at the nice thing with the IVRs, key presses. So understanding of where they drove. So it's great to understand how they converted, but why didn't they convert? To look at that and help monetize and all your calls instead of just letting it go.
Okay, Amalia, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that, and just say that some of the best ways to really get that ROI is to get all that data from the actual call itself, as well as all your campaigns and what's driving that traffic, to find out what's generating those highest quality calls, optimize budgets, and create those long-term partner relationships by being able to tweak here and there with getting that absolute granular data from what's actually happening with that interaction between the consumer and that campaign that you use to drive them there.
Okay. Ron, how would you advise marketers to take their results to the next level?
Taking the results to the next level is really starting to understand your customers. So when you're looking at a pay-per-call campaign, you really need to understand what the user is going to be looking for. Once you understand what the user is looking for, it's all about testing. Like Amelia was saying, and also Ring Partner was saying, you got to look at the results, but test. I mean, test different keywords, get into different strategies, look at the results, look at your conversion rate, and optimize from there. It's really about taking the time to do a lot of research, testing it, and then make the necessary changes.
Okay, and Brian, what about you? What are your suggestions?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with everyone so far, and just highlight, I think it's testing. I've done a lot of CPA, cost per acquisition myself, and it's very, very similar to other kinds. If you're doing a form fill or you're doing downloads or et cetera, it's just same thing for that. You have to understand the audience, and you have to understand what that vertical, what that category is going to perform best in. In our experience, search does really well with anything that's related to urgency. Somebody needs a lawyer now, they need a plumber now, they need a dentist now, whereas direct response kind of media does really, really great for things where there's less urgency involved around it, like cruises and even auto insurance, where you might not necessarily this second need an auto insurance card, but you're sort of interested. So knowing that there's differences based upon what you're driving calls for, driving conversions for, just like any other kind of CPA. Different media converts better for different kinds of offers. but it's really testing. So we use Invoca obviously here for a lot of our campaigns, and it's just having the analytics to know what's working, what's not, and look at the duration of the calls, and listen to your calls. Pay attention, really listen to your calls and understand the kind of calls that you're driving, so that you really understand the kind of value you're driving. And when you want to increase more, certain keywords you're driving a lot of customer service calls. Certain keywords you're driving a lot of not the kind of calls that you or your customer wants. So it's just really being aware of the kind of calls you're driving, and also what kind of audience are you trying to reach.
Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the concepts that you guys have brought up, but first let's kind of put into perspective for the viewers where you all fit in the pay-per-call industry. So tell us a little bit more about your company and what exactly you do. We'll start with Amalia from Invoca.
Great. So I am a customer success manager at Invoca. My role is to work with our partners and teach them the best ways to use our platform and our software in order to really maximize and capitalize the phone calls that they and their partners are driving. Sometimes that involves some creative strategies. Sometimes that involves just implementing those best practices just to really help them grow their business.
Okay, so other companies use your platform to run their business?
Yes, we're a technology that's licensed by networks, advertisers, publishers, anybody that's really values that inbound phone call and engaging that entire interaction and engagement with the end user or the caller.
Okay. Kevin, tell us more about RingPartner.
Sure. We are a performance-based pay-per-call network, and so we wear multiple hats. That we help focus. We work with buyers and sellers of leads, and basically connect people with people. So we're that connection between the two that helps them monetize calls and get calls in.
Okay. Ron, tell us about MobileFused.
Yeah, MobileFused, we focus on pay-per-call only, and we focus on mobile search only. MobileFused is basically, we're a mobile search. You can look at us like a marketing agency. We work with a small amount of partners, but our specialty is mobile search and driving pay-per-call.
Okay. And Brian, what does Search Initiatives do?
So, this part of the company related to this call is pay-per-call. We have a couple different divisions in different areas, but our primary focus on this side is on pay-per-call. And it's both as a network, providing offers, working with customers, and driving calls internally, as well as working with as a network. So we do, on this side of the business, we do everything across pay-per-call, and that is our focus of revenue generation.
Okay. And how many of you use the Invoca platform?
We do. RingPartner does for sure.
Yep. MobileFused does as well.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Invoca actually uses their own platform.
Yes. Exactly. Of course you do. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about testing the keywords. You guys all brought up testing. Now, this is one of the things that some marketers love to do, some marketers hate to do. How much testing and tracking really needs to be done in order to optimize results? Ron?
Quite a bit, actually. One of the things that we get asked here in mobile search a lot is, how do you get the results and how do you get the keywords that work? Really, it's about, and I know marketers don't like to test. It's not fun because typically when you test, you lose money. But really, getting started and then finding new keywords, it's all about testing. It's taking the time to look at your keywords, the amount of impressions, doing more of a broad match search to get the data you need. Really, to be successful, I feel you need to get that data, and sometimes, unfortunately, you have to pay for the data. So a lot of the marketers that we've talked to, it's really about getting them to understand that, you're looking at a certain specific vertical. Take auto insurance. You want to do anywhere from 8 to 20 to 40 hours of keyword research. Set up your ad groups and really run everything as a test and go as broad as possible. What you're looking at is, don't look at it as like you're losing money. but look at it as like you're paying for data. Once you get that data, you can go back into the Invoca analytics. You can see what keyword group is converting at what percentage, what your cost per click is, what your EPC, what your ROI is, and then optimize from there. Unfortunately, with the ever-growing world of pay-per-call, you're consistently optimizing. I mean, you're going to find keywords that do great for a long amount of time, but you're going to have to consistently optimize it. Maybe lower your bid price, raise your bid price. It's really going to depend on conversion rates and EPC. But the main thing is really just continue to do keyword research, testing, go on broad match. Unfortunately, like I said, you're probably going to lose some money, but that data that you pay for is invaluable.
Okay. Brian, how much keyword research, testing, and tracking do you suggest?
Never stop, ever, constantly.
Oh, come on. It's like a never-ending math class.
Never.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in this industry, if you if you look at it as a chore, I don't recommend that you continue in this industry. So you have to look at it as a challenge and something that you actually find a way to enjoy, because it's something that you're going to do forever. And if you want to make money, I think we'll all go to work in the morning to make money. So if whatever you're doing it to make money. You have to be good at that, and that has to be something that you learn to actually enjoy doing, which I actually really enjoy doing. It's great. And the other part, keywords, I agree with everything Ron said. I want to also highlight that anytime you're doing a landing page, obviously that goes into the same mix with keywords and the ad copy you're using, and knowing that ad copies and the landing pages are an important part of the mix of, does this keyword really work, and to what ROI does it work, and then that whole picture. So you really need to make sure you have the analytics across all of the different elements of your campaign, so that you really can hone down this keyword with these kind of creatives, this kind of messaging, and this kind of landing page is getting the best result. And then you can sort of scale with that and move on to the next set.
Okay. Kevin, what about you? How much testing and tracking do you say that they should do?
Yeah, I think I agree with both. It's ongoing. There's so many different variables, and I often see people starting out and they just look at the keywords, but as Ron was, you were saying, that there's so many different aspects of it that you need to look at the content, the landing page, the keywords, and mix it all together, and then don't just stop there. You want to look at seeing what keywords aren't converting in your ad group, so that you can take those out, and all of a sudden that ad group is profitable. So you want to continue doing that all the way through, and try different ways of doing it. We know people that put thousands and thousands of keywords in groups, and others that do smaller groups and able to monetize, or to easier for them to optimize those groups. So try different methods all the time. Don't just stick to one and say, oh, this worked once, or it didn't work, I'm never doing it again. Always try new things.
Okay. Amalia, what do you think? What do you recommend?
Sure. So kind of coming from that technology standpoint and using calls to mine that data and then optimize from there, you just definitely want to make sure that you're capturing all that relevant data. So besides the keywords, there might be other parameters that are coming across in the URL that you can capture. So ultimately maybe tie that back to a membership ID, so that you can further engage that customer or know the experience there. So there's really just a gamut of things that you can do to see what's happening with that phone call and what's driving it, even outside of A/B testing landing pages and running those keywords. Obviously, that's a big part of it. And then additionally, other tweaks that can be made are within the call treatment itself. So your particular messaging to your end user, you want to be clear, kind of understand what that intent is, maybe through KeyPress, and optimize that messaging so that not only are you driving a quality caller, but they're having a good enough experience that they're going to want to continue engaging on that phone call, and hopefully at the end of the day convert all the way through to a sale. So, yeah, testing continuously to use all that data to find those good calls and bad calls so that you can filter and calibrate to get to where you need to be.
Okay, so let's take a little step back with the keywords. Most of you have mentioned doing a lot of testing and tracking with the keywords, but how do you recommend people find those keywords in the first place? What kind of keyword research would you recommend? And whoever wants to answer that.
With the keyword research, I think one of the mistakes that I see a lot of people making is not thinking like a customer. You need to think like a customer. So if you're, let's say for an example, you're looking for health insurance, one of the things that you're going to want to do your research on is, you know, what people are going to be searching for, health insurance coverage or PPO plans or HMO plans. You need to really find the relevant keywords. So when you're doing keywords research, it's not just doing keyword research just to do keyword research. It's thinking about the customer. So some of the things you can do is research the company you're going to be driving phone calls for. See what they offer, see what they don't offer, and then target your keywords from there. Another thing, too, is just using a lot of the keyword tool. Surprisingly enough, I found some of the best keywords on accident just by doing research. Use your resources. I mean, like Brian was saying, you have to know the customer. If you don't know the customer, you're not going to get the quality. So really, it's thinking like the customer. You don't want to just put keywords in there just to put keywords in there. Also looking at the amount of impressions too, because if you're taking keywords that have too low of an impression, you're not going to get the volume. You're not going to get the data. So that's really where taking the keywords that you find and going a broad match to see what other keywords are related.
Okay. Does anyone else have any advice on keyword research?
Yeah, I would say that something else to take in mind for that research, obviously it's the technology, we don't spend a lot of time at that level, that's really our partners, but what I have observed is just if you have access to those call recordings to actually see what's happening on those calls, I think a lot of times search is conversational. You're sort of asking, you know, a search engine a question, and so generally those keywords are actually going to come up in conversation. So along with call intelligence, there's conversation intelligence, and picking up on those verbal cues and keywords might be a good option to try when actually trying to optimize your keywords at the beginning of that user experience.
Okay. Brian, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with both of them, Amelia and Ron. I would say that I think one thing that we found in general, and I like to focus on, is the intent around the keyword. A lot of new people in pay-per-call, I think, make the mistake of going to the keyword tool or going to something like SEMrush or something like that and getting a list and everything that relates to plumbers, they put it up, and that's what we're going to start with testing with. And I agree with the broad technique that Ron mentioned earlier on an earlier question as a starting place, but then there's some limits. There's some things you just don't, in my perspective, I don't put in. Like if I'm looking for plumbers and I'm driving calls for plumbers, I don't put plumbing supplies or anything related to plumbing supplies in the keywords, or plumbing training or plumbing certification. It seems so simple, but people are paying for those clicks. And yeah, you may have 1 out of 10,000 clicks where somebody's looking for a plumbing supplies, and they say, oh, forget it, I might as well just call John's Plumbing. But it's really not a great place to focus. So it's around the intent of the keyword, and keep that in mind. So really keeping the customer in mind helps with that. But remember, the intent of the keyword is really important.
Absolutely, Brian, and thanks for expanding on that. That's what I mean by understanding your customer is getting the customer intent. Great expansion, Brian.
Yeah, those are some good points, guys, because a lot of people get so focused in mining the data and you know, it's this word, it's that word, long tail, short tail. They forget to actually take a step back and put the human element back in, which is actually, you know, that's part of the beauty of pay-per-call, is it does include that human element, so we can't really take it out when we're talking about the technology as well.
Very true.
Kevin, did you want to add anything about keyword research?
Yeah, I just want to tag on what Ron was saying about use your resources, and that's where we come in, is to be able to ask us what it's about. So ask your account rep, talk to the buyer if you can, to figure out what it is they're looking for. A lot of people assume what they're looking for, and they go off on a completely different tangent. So figure out exactly what the characteristics are you're looking for, and often it ties into this. People say, what's the best campaign to run? Do something that you know about. If it's something you know about, maybe you just purchased flooring, try that. You know the keywords. You were a customer, so you're thinking in that lines that Ron was talking. But if you know nothing about it, maybe go for something else.
Okay, so if this discussion was about pay-per-click, we could focus a lot more on keywords because that's pretty much what you have to work with. But with pay-per-call, we've got metrics we can look at, we've got data, we've got other things to test and track. So when someone's running a pay-per-call campaign, what are the most important metrics and data that they should capture, and what should they be paying most attention to? Brian?
Well, that's a loaded question. How long do we have?
How long do you need?
Start with the simple. The simple ones are, well, all the campaign data, right? You have to definitely know what keyword are they coming from for keyword, or from what creative, what ad copy, what radio play, where are they coming from, what creative is it, what landing page are they going to, the calls, listen to the calls, obviously you know what the duration of the calls are, what the intent on the calls are. If you hear a lot of important negative key phrases on those calls, like support or issues with my account and things like that, and optimizing your campaign. Definitely, it starts, I think, from the beginning of what we've been talking about, is really knowing the customer and then knowing your audience. So your customer is, if it's Allstate Auto Insurance, it's knowing who are they really trying to reach, and what are those people looking for? What's the messaging that they really want to respond to, and catering from the beginning your messaging for that, and then you can set up a funnel where you're tracking every piece of it and finding that this landing page with this particular radio ad, it doesn't have to be search, is driving this kind of conversion that has X length of phone call and is backing out to this for the customer. So I think that would be my initial answer, at least the shortest answer.
Okay. Ron, what do you think?
Kind of expand on that, yeah, I'll give the short answer for him. I think the most important things that you can look at is your ROI and EPC, so return on investment and earnings per 100 calls. That is so important. One of the things you have to look into it is your conversion rate too as well. Conversion rate as well. So when you're looking at your calls going in through the Invoca platform, it'll show you a conversion rate. Conversion rate can also affect your ROI. So you may have two different auto insurance campaigns. One pays, let's just say for an example, $18, one pays $16. That $16 campaign may still be more profitable because of the conversion rate. So really the main things that I look for is first and foremost conversion rate. What am I spending on the clicks? What is the cost per click? How many calls am I generating? What is my conversion rate? Once you get your conversion rate, you can back it into your clicks. Your earning per 100 calls, your EPC is huge too, because again, you can take that same example, auto insurance, $18 and $16, and you might have a heck of a lot higher EPC on the $16 campaign just because of the conversion rate. So the main thing is really looking at ROI, EPC, conversion rate. They all go hand in hand. By understanding that, you can know what to bid on, so you can target your cost per click. So if I have an offer that pays out $10, I have a 25% conversion rate, I'm 1 out of every 4 calls is going to convert. So I'm going to have to look at my bid price, my cost per click, to match it up to the payout to make it work there. So that's where those big 3 numbers come in, is really understanding your numbers. Conversion rate, ROI, so you can adjust your cost per click, you can optimize your keywords per source. Sometimes you're going to have to get rid of keywords, sometimes you have to lower bids, sometimes you can increase your bid on a certain keyword to get more volume because the conversion rate is doing so good. So that's the short answer, the short version of it.
Okay. Kevin, what do you think?
I agree with the payout. Definitely, that's a huge one. Often people see that. Same thing with Ron, that people look at a lower payout and it's not working. But give it a shot, because it definitely can, based on that conversion. And looking at the conversion all the way through, whether it's click to the call, click to the conversion, the call to conversion, and looking at the network numbers when you look in. Though the EPC is important for your traffic, so when you look in, you can see network-wide, and that's important to get a judge, but don't say, oh, that's not for me, because one partner can definitely skew those numbers if they had a low conversion driving a lot of calls. So don't discard campaigns based on one thing. Take a look at them in a little more detail and talk to your account rep there. As well as the other one that I look at is looking at the calls again that didn't convert. So you go through and again looking at those key presses, because there's a huge opportunity that you could be sending calls that you could be monetizing that you just aren't. And so there's some great tools using call promotions through Evoca that you can look at those calls coming in and divert them to another call and monetize everything.
Okay. Amalia?
From sort of a data standpoint and what I'm seeing a lot of folks are paying attention to, it's sort of at a micro and macro level where you're really understanding the attribution and what drove that call, be that the landing page, the keywords, the ad copy, the ad that was used, if you have maybe sub-publishers or affiliates, which one of them are really helping to promote that campaign the best. So you're really kind of diagnosing and matching what drove that caller to make that call, especially when that's a high quality call. And then you're looking at the call itself and all the data that you can mine out of that call. How long was the call? What was said on the call? Was there any intent expressed through the key presses? And then all that other kind of demographic data about where they're calling from and when they're calling. And further using that to maybe optimize between when you get a call that you've driven, where you're actually sending that to. So with calls, that's kind of fun, is the routing piece, where you can have multiple opportunities that might be a fit for the call which you just procured, and how you're going to optimize sending that call based on that data which you're getting, and going from there. So I think understanding all that data is really the best way to get that value and use those metrics and data there.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about data, numbers, metrics, and earlier we were talking about the importance of the human element when it comes to these calls. So when it comes to call intelligence, do we have access to other data that's more human, more personalized, such as demographics, geographics, stuff like that? Amalia?
Absolutely. So nowadays, really doing some cool things to support phone calls and understand every point of that phone call. Sorry, I feel like my screen might be not a little bit complete, I guess. Do I look good? Okay, yeah. Sorry. I just noticed I was frozen, and I was like, oh, that's not really the frame I wanted. But to answer your question, yeah, no, really exciting things going on with that call and conversation intelligence that can be capitalized on the human experience. A lot of that has to do with enhanced caller profiles, so being to leverage integrations with other partners that already have data maybe attached to that caller ID or some other piece of that end user as they've engaged with other media or events with that partner and that buyer or advertiser. So being able to capitalize on that and get the full scope of who is calling with that demographic data, sometimes called the data dip, is a really great way to get that perspective and drive more like that.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything to add on the more human element as opposed to just the numbers?
That would. Go ahead, Ron.
Ron?
It's probably going to be close to what Brian was thinking here. I think Brian brought up some really good points with intent earlier. The human interacting with the human nature is coming down to intent. When you're looking at, as far as at least the mobile search side, typically the keywords we're targeting is people have intent. So what we're doing is we're connecting a customer with a service or product they need. That's the important part of the human element. The human element they want something, they need more information. They may not want to go online to get their personal information. They may have some more questions. So really, it's kind of going back into the intent. It's not only are you driving a good quality call for an advertiser, but you're helping someone. You're helping them find that product or service they're needing. It's a great point on the human element. And then also going back into like the state lists and the geographics, like you were talking about a little bit earlier. It's sometimes it's really matching up a client to a customer. You may have a client who can, let's use auto insurance for an example. They can give some really good rates for people that currently have insurance, but their uninsured prices may not be that good. And then you may have a client who can give a customer a better price because they don't have insurance, and it's combining those customers together to give the user the best experience. And you can do that through like the IVR with Invoca. You can use it with your call tracking. You can also look at the data on the back end, how the conversions are per state, and really the human element is matching a great client to a consumer who needs that service right then and there, going back into the intent.
Okay. Brian, what were you going to say?
Yeah, exactly. What Ron said, I'll just expand on, it's a little more advanced, but for the people who have a little experience or ones that have a little experience, we found it very successful to some campaigns to target to specific demos, obviously in a certain, whether it's male or female, and also sometimes it's by income level, and targeting the messaging around that because the customer, they need a particular kind of customer, and it drives a lot better of calls to do that. So we do that, as well as I think having the messaging, understanding your audience, we've been talking about, but then if you're going to do a campaign for a certain kind of product or service, sometimes it's even certain devices you want to advertise on and have a certain messaging. Like I'll have a different messaging, not just because of the character limitations, but because of the audience on WAP phones compared to the iOS advertising. So that goes to demo and audience of know who your audience is, and the messaging should really, as much as possible, be tuned to that audience.
Okay. Kevin, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, the other side of it, just going through, we've found testing out different IVRs, working with our buyers and testing IVRs and how we ask the question rather than just a computerized press 1 for this, press 2 for this, doing kind of some leading and more human questions to get the answer that you're looking for. And because often, people aren't, they're not really, they may just press 1 because it's the easiest thing, but you need to, in a way, talk them through and walk them through that process to make sure that you're getting the qualified person that you're getting to connect to the buyer.
Yeah, and also, part of the customer experience here is usually actually talking to somebody, talking to a customer service rep or talking to a salesperson on the phone. So how do we actually monitor what's going on in that conversation? I know you said listen to the call, but besides sitting down and listening to hours and hours and hours worth of calls, how can we get to the meat of what's happening? Because that can really affect the conversion rate in the end. If you're not getting any sales, it could be just the experience that they had with that other person. Anybody want to talk to that?
For us, I'm going to lead into Amalia because we use one of their great service, Signal, and that works very well for us because it we wear two hats, looking out for the buyer and the seller, and allows us to pick keywords that we want to do for either for quality assurance and for optimization. And it allows us to look and listen and see how the agents are handling the calls, what they're saying, what's getting dropped, and then we can then go back to the buyers and talk to them, figure out how they can better sell, what it is they're looking for, in that side of it. So I can let Amalia talk more about it, but it's been a great service for us.
Okay, Amalia?
Glad to hear that. Yeah, no, I think Signal is a really neat way to sort of minimize that manual labor, although, we definitely encourage sampling through calls to continue to understand that quality monitoring and any potential fraud or unintentional calls. Definitely Signal is a great way to understand what's going on in that phone call, maybe what stages are unfolding, what questions are coming up, And if there is a particular maybe script that that advertiser uses as they guide a consumer through a process and conversation, it might be obvious that that was a really quality phone call because they used the words credit card or appointment set, or maybe they delivered a quote and got an email address or something to that point. So being able to look at a report which shows all your calls for the day and how many times that signal was met or not met really helps with just getting more data to create a more optimized campaign and drive more calls like the one you saw. Because although understanding the duration of the call, you can imagine someone on the phone for 10 minutes would be a great phone call, but there's those rare chances where maybe the call rep was getting berated for 10 minutes. It was actually a negative experience. So just really great ways to get that real-time understanding and insight to perfect the campaign.
Okay, Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with what both of them said so far. And just another thing I would add is I think having direct connection to your buyer, to your customer as much as possible, or the people that you're working with, having that relationship so that you get feedback in a quicker time frame, so that the people you're working with have the relationship with the people who are taking the phone calls, so with ADT or Allstate or whoever it is. So when the feedback loop, it actually gets back to you and isn't passing through 5 people's hands and never gets back to you what's going on, is important. And I think also on our side, we always do some test calls when we start a campaign on our own, have people on our team call from their cell phones, call from office phone, test the calls. Obviously, we tell our partners that we're not billing them for those calls, that they were test calls, but it allows us to go through the process of really hearing what the experience is like. Throwing in some particular campaigns, it's good to throw in a couple variables in there and make sure that there's not a gaping loophole of that we're not going to get paid on calls that are good calls. So test that process and make sure there's nothing that needs to be worked out there. But I think so the direct relationship is as close as possible to the buyer. And then number 2 is actually test the calls yourself. If you're running a campaign, call them and test the process yourself.
Yeah, excellent advice there.
I did want to add and just jump in onto that when you were talking about the relationship with the buyer. One of the cool things that we do with the Invoca technology, and I'm sure others in the industry do something similar, but you can get that insight into if that call actually converted into a conversion event for the for that advertiser. If they had a sale or had a quote and that's something that they capture in their own software in business, then that's something that, with just understanding what time that call started, they can actually report that back into our software. For Invoca, it's via email or even an API for more real-time capabilities. But you can then match up what phone call you delivered and if that actually turned into a revenue-generating sale. And around that create a pay-on-sale campaign, which can be really great as far as a high-quality call is considered.
Nice. Okay. Ron, did you have anything to say about the customer call experience?
Yeah, I think the customer call experience is probably the most important thing. Really, with the customer call experience, you can get so much information from a call. Like Amelia was saying, you can look and see what sources are driving a better call, what sources aren't driving a better call. Going back to Brian's point, it's about the customer and source of traffic. I mean, if you're listening to calls and you see that calls are not coming in that are converting into sales, you need to get rid of those calls because otherwise your advertising partner is not going to work with you very long. The importance of that coming in is when you're initially testing a campaign, you're going to spend a lot of money to get data. But if you cannot have an IVR, have a good customer experience where the advertiser is going to make revenue too, they're probably going to not work with you, and then you just spend a lot of money and don't have a campaign running. So it's a big thing. One of the other things is bringing back in the human element. When you're bringing back in the human element, one of the best examples I can give is people looking for help for addiction. People may be looking for an inpatient treatment. They may be looking for an outpatient treatment. They just may be looking for a detox. So all that stuff is important because you can set up your IVR, you can set up calls to go one place, you can set up calls to go to another place, you can monetize your calls, or if you can't help a customer in the addiction, like addiction for an example, you give them a phone number to where they can go and help. So you're still helping out with that human element.
Okay, so besides what we've talked about already, what are some other ways that we can monitor for quality and for fraud? Amalia?
Sure. So definitely important to be doing that. Quality and monitoring for fraud really do go hand in hand. At the end of the day, you just want to make sure an intentional caller is getting to the advertiser. So one of our best practices that we recommend is using at least one key press. It could be as simple as for sales press 1 or customer service press 2 and still route to the same phone number, but you're asking them to engage and confirm that they're calling for the right reason, because there are misdials and there can be confusion with ad copy. Whether it's search or whether it's a billboard. At the end of the day, just doing that due diligence to make sure that you're filtering so that when the call gets to the call rep, it's a productive moment for the end user, the publisher, and the advertiser themselves.
Okay. Kevin, what do you guys suggest for monitoring quality and fraud?
Sure. So going to the very, very beginning, we're trying to be as proactive as we can just with who we allow to run the campaigns, so that's just being proactive side of it. But in-house we've built some tools as well that allow us to monitor any suspicious activity. So it alerts us if there's anything wrong, whether it's a spike in call volume or it's a call frequency is really, really high. Maybe it's duplicate caller IDs. So we want to look at those different things, flags us if there's an issue, and then we can dive in much deeper to it.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, again, agree with everybody. I say also using a platform like Invoca, whether you use an Invoca or you export your call logs and review them. Sometimes, just looking at the calls and seeing that things make sense. Listening to the calls, you're going to catch a lot of this. But then if you have different people listening to 10,000 calls, they may not look at. We've had partners that it's amazing how the same person's interested in ADT and Allstate Insurance and drug rehab on the same day. I mean, that person's going through one hell of a day. The same person's calling multiple campaigns. So, just having high-level view and looking at your data and seeing if you have the same person calling multiple offers, that's an immediate highlight that there's probably an issue. But listening to the calls is really the biggest thing on our side, and also, limiting who can run the campaigns and setting low benchmarks. You can send 10 calls, and we'll review them and give you feedback, and then we can go on to, if those are great, we'll do another, 10 a day or that kind of thing, so that you're gating the experience with a new source of traffic. Same way that if I was driving calls, I would do on my own. I wouldn't go out and do a $50,000 radio buy initially. I might do 2 stations in LA and test that. Same kind of thing I would do working with partners is scaling and really testing and learning that new traffic source or that new partner before you increase the volume.
Okay. And Ron, what would you say about quality and fraud monitoring?
As far as fraud monitoring, we really don't run into a lot of the fraud monitoring, the fraud calls. But like Kevin and Brian both said, is looking at anomalies like the landlines calls, looking at a conversion rate. I mean, if you have an offer converting at 80%, you probably want to look into those because they're probably not going right, and a bunch of landline calls coming in over and over again. I think one of the biggest advice that I can give is really building a relationship with your partners who are going to be driving calls. If you build a relationship and get to know them, you can build trust, and once you have that trust established, it's a lot easier. But I mean, we haven't seen fraud in quite a while, so that's stuff I'm kind of going back on the past.
Okay, so Ron, you mentioned that if you're seeing conversions of 80%, something's not right. What kind of conversions are you looking for?
So basically when a call comes in with Invoca's tracking platform, let's say there was 10 calls generated. 8 calls went into the IVR 8 calls went over a duration. So let's say the duration, for an example, is 2 minutes. You see durations going 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Typically, with an IVR, you're creating a user experience, but you're also pre-qualifying a call for your partner. So if you're pre-qualifying them, keywords are great, and the intent of the keyword is good, but 80% is pretty unrealistic for the most part. It's basically saying, you know, hey, I want everything perfect. I'm your perfect client, and I'm going to buy right now. But when you look at your call recordings and your data, you're going to see that the calls for 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Typically on a pay-per-call, your conversion should be anywhere between 15 to 30 to 40%, depending on the keywords and if it's kind of a volume play or a quality play. There's two different ways to look about it. So if you're converting at 80%, is it always a sign of fraud? No, but I would say 90% of the time it would be.
Okay. Does anyone else have different experiences with the conversion rates?
I agree. 100%
Pretty much on
agree.
track? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you guys like pretty much agree on everything. So
one thing I wanted to point out is just on the sending 10 calls to start off with. That's huge, especially from people that are used to just doing form submits from traditional. They're like, oh, I can just send as much as I want. But realizing that we're connecting people with people. So we have to make sure that there's agents on the other side, that there's how many calls per hour they can take, how many agents there are, to work with the buyer on that side of it. And so if you're new to the space and you're starting to send calls, that's a very important part to ask as well, just to make sure that the buyer can handle the calls. You know, not saying your calls aren't good, but if they're on hold and they're sitting in a queue and they're dropping off, we need to work on that. So it's important to understand your call flow on that as well.
yeah, you know, it seems to me that pay-per-call is getting more and more popular, more and more prevalent. Why do you guys think it's growing? Anyone?
Mobile. I mean, I'll give you quite a few good reasons, but I mean, everybody has a smartphone almost anymore. I think it really comes into a convenience play for people. People want something right then and now, they're going to pick up their phone. If they're at work and they're not allowed to use their internet, or they're at the doctor's office waiting, or if it's even they're at home, they're watching TV, they see a commercial of a product and they want to know more about it. You know, a lot of times they'll search on the mobile phone. Really, I think it's convenience, and then also the technology play of the mobile and the smartphone coming through. Mobile's taken over desktop, and I think it's just going to continue to grow, and that's why the pay-per-call is becoming more and more exciting.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
That's Brian. So I would also say that I definitely agree, and I would say that about around two-thirds of businesses in the United States are traditional over the phone. People are used to dealing with business on the phone. And even though you got a smartphone hanging around with you, you generally want to call and talk to the dentist. You want to call and talk to the doctor. You want to call and talk to your Allstate agent. You don't want to do the online form and wonder what's going to come out of that. There's still a lot of sort of mistrust about the total e-commerce experience. And there's a lot of things that just make sense to be on the phone with somebody. If I'm a doctor, I don't want to fill out a form for the doctor. I want to call and talk to somebody and schedule an appointment. So most of the industries, actually, most SMBs industries for sure in the United States are naturals for the phone call. That's how they do business. That's what they want. It makes sense. I think on the other side, for people who are not even traditionally in that space, is that it's so less. We've talked about fraud on this call, but it's so less fraud prone than most other kinds of marketing. You get a phone call, either the person's interested in what you provide or not. There's no, there's not bot clicks. You're not paying for views that nobody actually saw your ad. You're not paying for, we're all these kind of, all the technology that's out there now trying to provide actual value to the other kinds of marketing out there. Pay-per-call is intrinsically valuable in what it is. It provides a value. It's a live person on the phone interested in what you do business in. So I think any business that's looking for better ROI and better conversions, it makes sense to focus on, certainly have a pay-per-call campaign.
Okay, is this demographic specific? Because it would seem to me that 21-year-old kid is less likely to actually use their smartphone to make a call than, say, a 55-year-old woman who might, default to wanting to talk to someone on the phone. So is it specific demographics that we're seeing use this from the customer side?
I think it's a lot of we were talking about the human experience. It's the campaign. It all varies. If you're looking for a plumber and you need an emergency, whereas the 21-year-old may be like, oh, I'm just going to do a search on my phone, where grandma may go to her phone book. So if they're looking at, so it does vary on the campaign and the emergency level of something, but we're seeing it across the board. It's not necessarily specific, just one demographic.
Okay. Any other experiences that are same, different?
Yeah, I would say that it's also pretty vertical specific. There's definitely products that aren't really meant for or don't get as much value out of the phone call, that there's a lot more engagement just purely online, and then that's really where the path ends. But for anything that requires a little bit more information, some understanding, maybe even personal information, I know I feel really uncomfortable just putting my social security number on the internet. So just being able to have that trust that there's someone on the other line as an end user who is a human and invested and has a professional tone to get those questions answered and ask them the way you want. Sometimes the FAQ list isn't everything. So whether it's finance or education, whatever that might be, home services, and you're dealing with a more expensive product, you have some questions, that's really when you're going to click the best with the phone calls.
Okay, so let's list some of the verticals that pay-per-call performs the strongest in. Amalia, what do you think?
Sure. So I started to list them. Really anything with sort of a higher price tag that you want to know more about. Any sort of financial product. Maybe you're talking about loans or mortgages or debt or credit repair, anything along those lines. Home services, you're looking to schedule someone to come by the house and build fence, whatever that might be, or like plumbing services. Those are really going to be high performing, and you're really going to get a lot of data from those phone calls to be able to optimize and capitalize on that there. We're learning about many others. Health and beauty can do well. Psychics. It's kind of across the board to some respect, and people are trying everything every day, and we're learning new ways to implement the phone call into the journey, even as much as car purchases at this point. So really, they are relevant in a lot of different ways, and it does come down to testing. But the ones I began to mention were really are kind of tried and true, and we know to do pretty well.
Okay. Does anyone else have other verticals that they've seen perform well?
I think it's home services, finance, legal, doing very well, and more specifically the localization. We're working so closely with a lot of local buyers now, small, mom and pop shops that are looking for those calls that we're able to send them for people in their area. So.
Okay.
Oh, and just to add, given it's almost so obvious that I forgot it, but insurance, health insurance, auto insurance, obviously health insurance is huge right now. That's one of the great ways to use those phone calls is to leverage being able to inform the customer so that you can direct them to the right place, because health insurance can be really convoluted. It comes with a lot of different factors for the buyer, and driving that right call to the right place is really key and something that you can leverage a lot better at that end of the route with the phone call, in my opinion, than online, a lead form or such.
Okay. So we've been going almost an hour. We've had a lot of good strategies and techniques come out of this call. I'm going to go through each of you and give me your final words for the marketers that are watching that either have been thinking about pay-per-call but haven't yet made the leap, or they've started and they want to further optimize, they want to take advantage of the technology and the options that are out there. What do you tell those marketers in order to be a bigger success this year? Ron?
Great question. Really, it comes down to, if you're looking to get into pay-per-call, my biggest suggestion is you need to put the time and effort into it. Pay-per-call is a great source. It's very intent customer driven, but it does take a lot of work. I've seen a lot of people out there, people talk to me and go, oh, pay-per-call is so awesome and easy, I just throw out a keyword and get a phone call. It's not really how it works. The biggest advice I can give to someone wanting to get into pay-per-call is, if you have the time, the resources, and the motivation, this is a great space for you. It really is. Even if you're starting off small, start off small. Choose a budget and build a budget up. But budget's going to come into play. I hate to say it, but budget does come into play. Whether you start small and build it up and then go bigger, you're going to need some type of budget to get it in. And then just testing, research, optimization. One of the points that Kevin brought up that I really like, and it's great advice for other people, is talking to your account manager. Typically, they can give you a lot of great ideas. They can tell you what's working, what sources aren't working. They can listen to call recordings, say, hey, get rid of this source, get rid of that source. But I think as a marketer, with your account manager, you need to be willing to take their information and use it. But when they give you information, use it, test it, and then come back to them. That's the best way they're going to be able to help you out, really.
Okay, Ron, you mentioned having a budget, but isn't the idea to get a positive ROI going here?
Absolutely, and that's one of the ways that you can build a budget. So there's two ways to do it. There's ways to start small and start big. Some affiliates come in and they start small, which is perfectly okay. When you're starting small, though, you almost have to do 2 to 3 to 4 to almost 10 times the amount of research, because when you're working with a, say, $500 budget compared to a $20,000 budget, it does make a difference. So if you're starting with a smaller budget, you're going to have to go more targeted keywords that have a better chance of converting, and limit your daily budget and get the data from there. Compared to someone who has a bigger budget, like $10,000 to $20,000, they can set their bid prices as high as they want. Typically they'll lose money, but at least they'll find out what the price of the cost per click that's going to drive the volume. So there's really two different ways to look at it. Some of the guys who are just getting into with a smaller budget, I think it's a lot more time and research, because they're going to have to find keywords that are about as targeted as possible to hopefully increase their chance of conversion. But the great thing is as they start small, they can build up a budget, and then turn into a bigger affiliate and make more revenue.
Okay. Kevin, what are your final words for the viewers?
Yeah, we touched on so many topics today and key points, and I think a lot of it is putting in the time and using your resources. If there is a low budget on that side of it, you need to do your checking and seeing what the best. There's so many resources, blogs specifically on the pay-per-call side of it. But we often see people starting off and say, oh, this person said to do this on this campaign, and it didn't work. Well, because they also told 10,000 other people the same thing. So use those tools, put your spin on it, talk to your account rep, listen to the calls, do the testing. It's not as easy as just putting the ad up and oh, it works. You have to do the research. You have to put the time in, and I think people forget that often. They'll just put the little bit in, set it and forget it. Hopefully it works, and it's not that easy.
It's supposed to be set it and forget it.
That's right.
Isn't everything supposed to be set it and forget it? That's the promise of online marketing, right? So.
Yeah, we're all sitting on the beach and having Mai Tais, right?
Yeah, or working in your underwear, right. One of those. With a sports car. Yeah. Okay, Brian, what do you think? What are your final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I really like Kevin's last points. I think that everything really put together everything we talked about on this call, but it comes back to I think one of the great suggestions that actually Kevin made earlier was start with something you know. If it's in your first campaign, pick out something that you're familiar with, that you recently bought or have gone through the experience of, so that you have a point of reference to start with from the customer's viewpoint, from the audience's viewpoint. Start there. Start small, depending upon your budget, but just start testing. Don't be afraid, and don't be sloppy is really my biggest recommendation. Don't be afraid of losing money. You can't. So it's a meme that I really love and I have up in my office, which is scared money doesn't make money. And I think it's really important for anything that you're doing. Set up a plan, do your research, set up the best possible funnel that you can based upon what you're marketing, and then just start doing it and optimize every day. And whatever your budget's, $5 or $500 a day, optimize every single day and get that campaign humming, and then move on to your second campaign. So take one at a time and go through the data and build.
Okay. Amalia, your final words for the viewers?
Yeah, I would certainly just sum it up. A couple R's, a couple have already been mentioned, but basically research, resources, refine, and relationships. There's definitely a lot of people that are passionate about pay-per-call that are in this space, and talking to them and talking to your account reps and your partners to really understand those nuances to what they're doing and those calls that you're sending in the best way to deliver those, is really the best for creating that long-term relationship and being able to drive the most value out of that reputation unlock, and you have your opportunity to scale once you sort of get a piece of it down. And it's not necessarily set and forget it, but you get your fundamentals, and conceptually you understand it to a point and develop your routine, another R, to roll into, and then run with it. Wow, I'm really on our roll.
Yeah, you like those R's.
Yeah, that's how making your routine it. Oh, now I can't stop. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, guys, everyone has shared a wealth of knowledge today. We've got a lot of great strategies, techniques, methods, and tips for the viewers to take their results to the next level this year. So I want to thank all of you so much for taking part in this roundtable discussion. Thank you to Amalia Beckman from Invoca, Kevin Wolski from Ring Partner, Ron McKinney from Mobile Fused, and Brian Osterhout from Search Initiatives. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Bye, guys.
Bye.
I'm Heather Bell
Bye.
from Performance Marketing Insider. Join us for the next roundtable discussion, and check us out online at performinsider.com.